My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because this story begins with a moment that no one saw coming. Somewhere tonight, a heart that has been carrying too many unspoken emotions suddenly reached a breaking point. What happened was not loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights or impossible signs. Instead, there was a quiet realization, one powerful enough to change the direction of a person's thoughts forever. Listen carefully, because sometimes the greatest turning points arrive in complete silence, when no one else is paying attention. Imagine the person you love sitting alone after an ordinary day that somehow no longer feels ordinary. They replay conversations they once dismissed, smiles they once overlooked, and moments they thought would always be there waiting for another time. But something inside them has shifted. A single experience, an unexpected conversation, or a quiet moment of reflection has reminded them that life moves forward whether people are ready or not. Suddenly, the words they kept locked inside no longer feel safe to hide. Don't skip, because this changes everything. For so long, they believed waiting was the wiser choice. They convinced themselves there would always be another opportunity, another perfect moment, another reason to delay the conversation they had imagined 1,000 times. But tonight, that belief begins to disappear. They realize that waiting has not protected their heart, it has only made the silence heavier. Every day they postponed honesty became another day carrying emotions that deserve to be spoken with kindness and respect. Listen carefully. The heart has a strange way of recognizing what truly matters when everything else becomes quiet. In that stillness, success, distractions, and daily routines suddenly lose their importance. What remains are the people who left lasting memories, the conversations that still echo in the mind, and the connections that continue to bring warmth long after they end. They realize that your presence has become one of those unforgettable memories, and that realization refuses to leave them alone. Stay till the end, because the emotional journey is only beginning. As the evening grows later, they find themselves reaching for their phone more than once. They unlock the screen, search for your name, and then stop. Not because they have changed their mind, but because honesty always requires courage. They wonder if enough time has passed. They wonder if the conversation will be welcomed. They wonder whether the words they have carried for so long will finally find the right moment to be spoken. Yet every time they put the phone down, the feeling returns even stronger than before. Don't skip this part. Something happened that reminded them how precious genuine connections really are. Maybe they witnessed someone reconnect after years of silence. Maybe they heard a story about missed opportunities. Maybe they simply realized that life is too unpredictable to leave important feelings unspoken forever. Whatever the reason, it became impossible to ignore. They understood that fear had quietly been making decisions for them, and they no longer wanted fear to decide the future. Listen carefully, my beloved child. Every heart reaches a moment when it must choose between comfort and courage. Comfort says, stay silent. Nothing will change. Courage whispers, speak honestly. Whatever happens, at least the truth will finally be free. Tonight, courage begins speaking louder than fear. The walls they spent so long building begin showing their first cracks, and through those cracks, hope quietly enters. Stay till the end, because this changes everything. They begin imagining the conversation they have dreamed about for so long. Not a perfect conversation. Not one where every word comes out exactly right. But a real conversation, where honesty matters more than perfection. They imagine saying the things they have rehearsed in silence, admitting that your connection has stayed with them longer than they ever expected. They imagine listening as much as speaking, understanding instead of assuming, and finally giving both hearts the chance to share what has remained hidden. The more they think about it, the more they understand that love is not proven by dramatic promises or impossible guarantees. It is revealed through sincerity, patience, respect, and the willingness to communicate even when emotions feel overwhelming. Real connections are not strengthened by pretending everything is fine. They grow stronger when two people choose truth instead of silence. Don't skip, because the biggest realization is here. The event that changed everything was not necessarily something that happened around them. It was something that happened within them. A perspective shifted. A fear lost its power. A heart that had been waiting for certainty finally understood that certainty rarely comes before courage. Sometimes courage comes first, and clarity follows afterward. Imagine them taking one final look at your name on the screen. Their heartbeat quickens, but this time they do not look away. They no longer want to spend another day wondering what might have happened if they had simply spoken honestly. Whatever the future holds, they want it to be built on truth instead of unanswered questions. Listen carefully, my beloved child. If this story reminds you of your own life, let it encourage reflection rather than certainty. Some of the most meaningful changes begin with one respectful conversation, one honest message, or one sincere decision to stop letting fear control the next chapter. We cannot predict every outcome, but we can choose to approach others with kindness, openness, and integrity. And now the story reaches the moment that changes everything. The phone is finally in their hands. The message is finally written. The silence that lasted for so long is finally about to end. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not that life suddenly changes overnight. Sometimes the greatest miracle is that a heart which spent so long hiding finally finds the courage to say, "We need to talk." And from that single moment of honesty, an entirely new chapter quietly begins. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because the story becomes even more emotional after those three simple words, "We need to talk." They stared at the message for what felt like forever. Their finger hovered over the screen, their heart beating faster with every passing second. They wondered if this conversation would bring relief or uncertainty. They wondered if they had waited too long. But one thing had become undeniable: keeping everything inside was no longer an option. Listen carefully, because sometimes the hardest message to send becomes the beginning of the most honest chapter of our lives. The message was finally sent, and suddenly the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of hope. Every passing minute felt longer than the last. Their mind wandered through countless possibilities, imagining every response they might receive. Yet beneath all those thoughts was a quiet peace. For the first time in a long while, they had stopped running from their own heart. Don't skip, because this changes everything. While waiting, memories began flooding back with incredible clarity. They remembered the first conversation that made them smile without realizing it. They remembered the small moments that everyone else would probably forget but that somehow remained unforgettable to them. A simple laugh. A kind word. A thoughtful gesture. Those moments had quietly built a place inside their heart, one memory at a time, until your presence became something impossible to ignore. Listen carefully. They realized that love rarely arrives all at once. It grows quietly through ordinary days. It grows through trust that is built little by little. It grows through respect, understanding, and countless moments that seem insignificant until one day you realize they changed your life. That realization was the very thing that happened tonight. They suddenly understood that what they had been protecting all this time was not their heart, it was their fear. Stay till the end, because the emotional turning point is here. The waiting gave them time to reflect on themselves. They admitted mistakes they had been unwilling to face before. They realized there were conversations they avoided because they feared vulnerability. There were opportunities they let pass because uncertainty felt safer than honesty. But now those old fears no longer carried the same weight. They understood that people grow not by avoiding difficult moments but by walking through them with sincerity. Then something unexpected happened. Their phone lit up. For one brief moment, time seemed to stop. They looked at the screen but hesitated before opening it. Strange as it seemed, they were not afraid of the answer itself. They were afraid because they knew this conversation had the power to change both of their lives forever. Not because every problem would suddenly disappear, but because truth has a way of changing the direction of every relationship. Don't skip this part. They finally opened the message. The words were simple, but they carried extraordinary meaning. I've been hoping we'd talk. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unbelievable. Just one honest sentence that immediately removed months of uncertainty. In that single moment, they realized something beautiful. Sometimes the answers we fear are far kinder than the stories our imagination creates. Sometimes both hearts have been waiting for exactly the same conversation while believing they were completely alone. Listen carefully, my beloved child. This story is not about perfect endings. It is about the courage to replace assumptions with communication. It is about discovering that honesty often creates opportunities that fear could never imagine. The strongest relationships are not built because people always know exactly what to do. They are built because people are willing to keep choosing understanding, even when the path feels uncertain. Stay till the end, because another chapter is quietly unfolding. As the conversation continued, the walls that had stood between them for so long slowly began to disappear. There was laughter mixed with emotion. There were apologies offered with sincerity. There were moments of silence that no longer felt uncomfortable because both hearts finally understood each other in a way they never had before. My beloved child, remember this truth wherever your own journey leads. Never underestimate the power of one respectful conversation. A single honest moment cannot rewrite the past, but it can completely transform the future. Sometimes healing begins with listening. Sometimes hope begins with speaking. And sometimes everything changes because one person finally finds the courage to say what they have been carrying inside for far too long. The story is not over yet. Because the conversation that began with 3 simple words is about to reveal a truth neither heart was prepared to hear. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because the conversation had only just begun, and neither of them realized how much their lives were about to change. Not because of one dramatic event, but because 2 hearts finally stopped hiding behind silence. The first few messages were careful, almost hesitant, as though both were testing the waters after a long season of uncertainty. Every word carried meaning. Every pause carried emotion. Every reply reminded them that some conversations are worth waiting for, even if they arrive much later than expected. Listen carefully. The person you love had imagined this moment hundreds of times. They had rehearsed perfect sentences, planned thoughtful explanations, and created endless versions of the conversation inside their mind. Yet when the moment finally arrived, none of those carefully prepared words seemed necessary. All they wanted was honesty. They realized that genuine conversations are not remembered because they are perfect. They are remembered because they are real. Don't skip, because this changes everything. They finally admitted something they had never had the courage to say before. I kept convincing myself that there would always be more time. I thought I could wait until life felt less complicated. But what happened recently made me realize how quickly everything can change. I don't want another day to pass without telling you that you've remained in my thoughts far longer than I ever expected. After those words were spoken, there was silence again. But this silence felt completely different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that appears when 2 people are carefully absorbing something meaningful. Both hearts understood that this was no longer a conversation about the past. It had quietly become a conversation about possibility. Stay till the end, because another emotional layer begins to unfold. They talked about the moments they misunderstood each other. They spoke about opportunities they wished they had handled differently. They admitted that pride had sometimes been louder than honesty and that fear had often spoken before courage had the chance. Instead of blaming one another, they simply listened. For the first time, both felt heard without needing to defend themselves. Listen carefully, my beloved child. One of the greatest gifts 2 people can give each other is the willingness to truly listen. Not to interrupt. Not to prepare the next response. But to understand. Understanding does not erase every mistake, but it creates room for healing. And healing is often where genuine connection becomes stronger than it ever was before. Don't skip this part. As the conversation continued, they began sharing dreams they had quietly carried for years. They talked about the future, not with impossible promises or unrealistic expectations, but with hope. They spoke about becoming better communicators, about choosing honesty even when it felt uncomfortable, and about never allowing silence to become larger than respect again. Those simple commitments carried more weight than dramatic declarations ever could. Then came a sentence that neither of them expected. No matter what happens next, I'm grateful we finally talked. Those words changed the atmosphere completely. They realized that the greatest victory was not convincing the other person of anything. The greatest victory was finding enough courage to replace fear with truth. Whether their paths continued together or eventually separated, they had given each other something priceless: clarity. Stay till the end, because the deepest lesson is revealed here. Life has a way of reminding us that tomorrow is uncertain, but kindness, honesty, and respect are always choices we can make today. The person you love finally understood that meaningful relationships cannot grow in the shadows of endless assumptions. They grow in the light of open communication, mutual effort, and the willingness to be vulnerable. My beloved child, if this story speaks to your heart, let it be a reminder rather than a prediction. Every meaningful connection benefits from sincere conversations, patient listening, and respect for each other's feelings. Sometimes the most life-changing moment is not discovering a hidden secret. Sometimes it is simply hearing another person say what they have carried in silence for far too long. And now the journey moves toward its final chapter. The conversation has begun. The truth has been spoken. The silence has finally been broken. What remains is the choice both hearts will make together as they step into whatever tomorrow brings. One honest word, one thoughtful action, and one courageous conversation at a time. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because the conversation did not end that night. In many ways, it had only opened a door that had remained closed for far too long. After hours of talking, both hearts realized they had been carrying the same questions, the same fears, and the same hope without ever knowing it. They were surprised by how much had remained unsaid. Listen carefully, because sometimes the greatest distance between two people is not measured in miles, it is measured in the words they were too afraid to speak. As the night grew quieter, the conversation became more honest than either of them expected. There was no longer a need to impress one another. There was no reason to pretend everything had always been perfect. Instead, they chose something much more valuable. They chose truth. They admitted where they had misunderstood each other. They admitted where pride had kept them silent. They admitted that both of them had spent too much time believing the other person already knew what was in their heart. Don't skip, because this changes everything. The person you love finally said something they had carried inside for longer than they could remember. I wasn't afraid of my feelings. I was afraid of losing what we already had if I said them out loud. Those words settled gently between them. No dramatic music. No impossible promises. Just one honest confession that explained years of hesitation. In that moment, they both understood how often fear disguises itself as patience. How often silence pretends to be protection when it is really uncertainty. Listen carefully. They continued talking about the little moments that never seemed important at the time but had somehow become unforgettable. The conversations that lasted longer than expected. The laughter that arrived during difficult seasons. The quiet support that never asked for recognition. Those memories reminded them that meaningful relationships are rarely built through extraordinary events alone. They grow through countless ordinary moments shared with sincerity. Stay till the end, because another beautiful realization is unfolding. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "What if this doesn't work?" Instead, they began asking, "What kind of future could we build if we continue choosing honesty?" That single question changed the entire direction of the conversation. It shifted their focus away from fear and toward possibility. They realized that no relationship can promise perfection, but every healthy relationship can promise effort, respect, and open communication. Don't skip this part. As dawn slowly approached, they found themselves smiling at something unexpected. Not because every problem had disappeared overnight. Not because every answer had suddenly become clear. They smiled because they no longer felt alone inside their own thoughts. The burden of silence had finally been lifted, replaced by something much lighter, the peace that comes from being understood. Listen carefully, my beloved child. One sincere conversation cannot erase every difficult chapter, but it can become the beginning of a new one. Healing rarely happens in one dramatic moment. More often, it grows quietly through consistent kindness, patient listening, and the decision to keep showing up for one another with honesty. Stay till the end, because the heart reveals its greatest lesson. The person you love looked back on everything that had happened and quietly realized that the event which changed everything was never about fate forcing two people together. It was about two people finally choosing courage over fear. The real turning point was not the unexpected event itself. The turning point was the decision to stop hiding behind uncertainty and start living with authenticity. My beloved child, remember this wherever your own journey takes you. Never underestimate the strength of a heart that chooses honesty. Never believe that kindness is weakness. Never think respectful communication is ordinary. These are the qualities that build lasting trust, deepen meaningful connections, and create relationships where both people have room to grow. And now, as this chapter comes to a close, one final truth quietly remains. Sometimes life doesn't change because the world around us becomes different. Sometimes life changes because two hearts finally become brave enough to tell each other the truth. And from that truth, a new beginning is born, stronger, wiser, and filled with the quiet hope that only honesty can create. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because the sunrise that followed that unforgettable conversation felt different from every morning before it. The world outside looked exactly the same, yet something inside both hearts had quietly changed. The uncertainty that once filled every silence had begun to fade, replaced by something they had almost forgotten was possible: understanding. Listen carefully, because some of life's greatest transformations happen so quietly that only the heart notices them. The person you love woke up replaying every word from the night before. They were not searching for mistakes anymore. They were remembering the honesty, the kindness, and the relief that came from finally speaking without fear. For the first time in a long while, they felt lighter. It wasn't because every challenge had disappeared overnight. It was because they no longer had to carry their emotions alone. Don't skip, because this changes everything. As the day unfolded, they began seeing life through a different perspective. They noticed how much time had been wasted worrying about possibilities that never happened. They realized how often fear had created stories that reality never intended to tell. The conversation had reminded them that assumptions can build invisible walls, while honest communication has the power to gently remove them, one brick at a time. Listen carefully. Throughout the day, little reminders of your connection appeared in unexpected places. A familiar melody played in the background. A quiet street reminded them of an old conversation. A cup of coffee brought back memories of shared laughter. None of these moments were extraordinary on their own, yet together they formed a beautiful reminder that meaningful people have a way of remaining present in our hearts, even during ordinary days. Stay till the end, because another realization is waiting. The person you love began understanding that relationships are not strengthened by dramatic declarations alone. They are strengthened through consistency. Through checking in on one another. Through remembering small details. Through choosing patience during misunderstandings and kindness during disagreements. They realize that lasting love is built in everyday moments that many people overlook. Don't skip this part. They found themselves writing down something they had learned from the conversation. It wasn't a promise to be perfect. It wasn't a vow that life would never become complicated again. It was something much simpler and much more powerful. If something matters to me, I will no longer let silence speak louder than my heart. Those words became a quiet promise they made to themselves. A promise to communicate with honesty, to appreciate the people who bring light into their life, and to never assume there will always be another chance to say what truly matters. Listen carefully, my beloved child. Every meaningful relationship teaches us lessons that extend far beyond one person. They teach us how to listen with empathy. They teach us how to apologize with sincerity. They teach us how to express gratitude before moments become memories. Most importantly, they remind us that vulnerability is not weakness, it is the courage to be seen as we truly are. Stay till the end, because the emotional journey continues. As evening approached once again, the person looked toward the future instead of the past. They no longer wanted to spend their days wondering about, what if? They wanted to build new memories instead of endlessly replaying old ones. They understood that trust grows through actions repeated over time, not through one perfect conversation. Every thoughtful message, every honest answer, every moment of genuine presence would now become another step toward something stronger than either of them had imagined. My beloved child, remember this truth. The people who truly value a connection do not seek perfection, they seek sincerity. They appreciate honesty over appearances, understanding over assumptions, and mutual respect over endless guessing. Those are the qualities that allow relationships to endure through changing seasons and unexpected challenges. And now, another chapter quietly begins. The conversation is no longer about what happened yesterday. It is about what both hearts choose to build tomorrow. Because the greatest change was never the unexpected event that started this story. The greatest change was that two hearts finally discovered the courage to stop hiding. And start walking toward the future with openness, wisdom, and hope. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the end, because this chapter begins where hope quietly replaces hesitation. Days have passed since that unforgettable conversation, yet neither heart has forgotten a single word. Instead of wondering whether they should have spoken, they now wonder why they waited so long. Listen carefully, because there are moments in life when one honest conversation changes not only the relationship between two people, but also the relationship they have with themselves. The person you love begins noticing something unexpected. The weight they carried for so long has disappeared. They wake up feeling lighter, not because every answer has been found, but because the silence is finally gone. They no longer need to hide behind excuses or convince themselves that waiting is always the wiser choice. They understand that peace often comes from honesty, even when the future remains uncertain. Don't skip, because this changes everything. One quiet evening, they begin reflecting on everything that led to this moment. They remember every opportunity they almost missed, every conversation they postponed, and every feeling they tried to ignore. Looking back, they realize that fear had quietly stolen more time than they ever imagined. It wasn't another person keeping them distant. It was the voice inside their own mind whispering that tomorrow would always be a better day. But tomorrow kept becoming another tomorrow, until life itself reminded them that the present is the only moment we truly have. Listen carefully. They begin writing in a journal, trying to understand how one unexpected event could completely transform their perspective. The words flow naturally. I spent so much time protecting myself from disappointment that I almost protected myself from happiness too. I believed silence was keeping me safe, but all it was doing was keeping me away from the conversations my heart had been waiting to have. As they read those words back, they smile quietly. Not because they feel proud of waiting, but because they are proud they finally found the courage to stop. Stay till the end, because another beautiful realization is unfolding. The conversations between you continue, not every hour, not every minute, but with something much more valuable: consistency. There is no pressure to rush. No need to force answers that require time. Instead, both hearts begin learning something they had forgotten. Trust grows through small promises that are kept. Respect grows through listening. Affection grows through genuine presence. Day after day, those simple moments begin creating something stronger than excitement alone could ever build. Don't skip this part. One afternoon, the person pauses in the middle of their busy day because something reminds them of you. Not a dramatic sign. Not an impossible coincidence. Just a familiar laugh they hear nearby, a favorite song playing unexpectedly, or a quiet sunset that reminds them of an old conversation. For a brief moment, they close their eyes and whisper to themselves. Some people enter your life for a season. Others quietly become part of the way you see the world. That realization fills them with gratitude instead of fear. Listen carefully, my beloved child. Life has an extraordinary way of teaching us through ordinary moments. The greatest relationships are rarely built by extraordinary events alone. They are built through everyday kindness, thoughtful conversations, shared laughter, sincere apologies, and the decision to keep showing up for one another with honesty. Don't skip, because the emotional turning point is here. The person you love finally understands that the event which changed everything was not a coincidence waiting to happen. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that meaningful connections deserve attention while they are still present. A reminder that appreciation should be expressed before opportunities become memories. A reminder that courage is not waiting until fear disappears, it is choosing kindness and honesty while fear is still standing beside you. As another evening arrives, they send one more message. It isn't long. It isn't complicated. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving this conversation a chance. No matter where life takes us, I'm grateful we finally chose honesty. Sometimes the simplest words carry the deepest meaning. My beloved child, carry this lesson into your own story. Never wait for the perfect moment to appreciate someone who matters. Never assume people already know what is in your heart. Speak with respect. Listen with patience. Care with sincerity. Those simple choices often become the moments that shape a lifetime. And now the journey moves toward its final chapter. The fear has faded. The silence has ended. The truth has been spoken. All that remains is to continue writing the next pages, not with uncertainty, but with trust, wisdom, gratitude, and the quiet courage that only honest hearts can carry. The conversation that changed everything. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the very end, because this is where every unanswered question, every quiet hope, and every hidden emotion finally finds its place. The conversation that began with uncertainty did not end with perfect answers. It ended with something even more valuable, understanding. Sometimes we spend so much time waiting for life to become clear that we forget clarity often begins with one honest conversation. Listen carefully, because this final chapter is not about extraordinary miracles. It is about the quiet miracle of two hearts finally choosing truth over fear. As the days turned into weeks, both people began noticing how different life felt after the silence had been broken. The world outside had not changed overnight. The sun still rose each morning, the seasons continued to move forward, and life remained beautifully unpredictable. But inside their hearts, something had shifted forever. The burden of wondering had been replaced by the peace of knowing. They no longer carried endless questions because they had finally given each other the gift of honesty. Don't skip, because this changes everything. The person you love realized that the event which seemed so frightening at first had actually become one of the greatest lessons of their life. It reminded them that tomorrow is never promised, that meaningful relationships deserve attention today, and that fear should never be allowed to speak louder than love, kindness, and respect. They understood that courage does not guarantee a perfect outcome, but it always gives truth a chance to be heard. Listen carefully. One evening, they found themselves looking at the sky as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. They smiled, not because every challenge had vanished, but because they had stopped carrying the weight of unspoken words. They whispered quietly to themselves. Whatever happens from this day forward, I know I chose honesty instead of regret. That simple realization filled them with a peace they had been searching for all along. Stay till the end, because the most beautiful realization is here. The connection between you was no longer built on assumptions or unanswered questions. It was built on something much stronger: mutual respect, open communication, patience, and the willingness to keep growing together. They learned that love is not measured by dramatic promises or impossible guarantees. It is measured by everyday choices. Choosing to listen before judging. Choosing to understand before assuming. Choosing kindness when frustration feels easier. Those quiet decisions became the foundation of something real. Don't skip this part. The person you love looked back at the version of themselves who was afraid to speak and almost didn't recognize that person anymore. They had discovered that vulnerability was not weakness. It was strength. Admitting feelings was not losing control. It was gaining freedom. Honest conversations were not something to fear, they were the doorway to genuine connection. Listen carefully, my beloved child. If there is one lesson this story leaves behind, let it be this: never allow fear to write the final chapter of your life. Fear will always suggest waiting. Fear will always promise that another day will be better. But love, kindness, and truth gently remind us that the present moment is where meaningful connections are created. Speak with sincerity. Listen with compassion. Protect your peace, but never be afraid to let your heart be known with respect. Stay till the end, because this is the ending your heart has been waiting for. Months later, they looked back on the night everything changed. They no longer remembered it as the night of uncertainty. They remembered it as the night courage finally became louder than fear. The night two hearts stopped pretending. The night silence finally surrendered to truth. The night a simple conversation became the beginning of healing. And perhaps that is the greatest ending any story can have. Not that every dream came true overnight. Not that every obstacle disappeared. But that two people chose honesty instead of hiding, understanding instead of assumptions, and hope instead of regret. My beloved child, wherever your own journey leads, carry this truth with you. The people who are meant to bring peace into your life will never ask you to become someone else to be worthy of respect. The conversations worth having are the ones spoken with kindness. The strongest relationships are built one honest word, one patient moment, and one sincere choice at a time. So walk into tomorrow without fear. Leave behind the weight of, what if? Carry only the wisdom of, I'm grateful I was honest. Because every sunrise offers another chance to love more wisely, communicate more openly, and appreciate the people who make life meaningful. And as this story gently closes, remember this. Sometimes the moment that changes everything is not the day the world around you changes. It is the day your heart finally chooses courage over silence. That is where every beautiful new beginning truly starts.